Have you ever heard of someone bursting into flames with no apparent cause? What could possibly cause such a phenomenon? Is this a real phenomenon or just an urban legend? Today we're investigating 5 strange cases of spontaneous human combustion, where we delve into the science and discuss the theories that attempt to explain these mysterious occurrences. Join us for a discussion that's sure to spark your interest. Welcome to Let's Be Briefed. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Sydney.
And this week we're together in the same room. Special edition.
Super exciting.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about spontaneous human combustion. You've heard of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
I don't know. Do you think it's like real?
No.
Yeah, I kind of maybe had thought like in the past, like when I was younger, but not anymore. Okay, well, spontaneous human combustion, which is also SHC, which I might say instead of saying the whole thing later, but it's a pseudo-scientific concept of the spontaneous combustion of a living human body due to internal chemical reactions without an apparent external source of ignition. And there have been accounts of alleged human combustion since 1663, although still like not all scientists are convinced it's even like a possibility. And the current scientific consensus is that purported cases of spontaneous human combustion involve overlooked external sources of ignition, but like due to the nature of fires, like the evidence gets lost. And apparently there have been around 200 reports worldwide over a period of like the last 300 years. So like less than one a year, I guess.
But still,
yeah.
There's something that they don't even know is real.
Right. Well, it's kind of like a catch-all of like, we don't really know, but there was fire involved, so we'll just say it's that, I guess.
Oh.
But yeah. There are some common characteristics in the cases. So usually the victims are chronic alcoholics, and early theories were that alcoholism caused it because of like the buildup of the alcohols like in the stomach or the intestines, I guess, could catch fire. Also, I guess ketosis, which can be caused by alcoholism or like a low-carb diet, I guess it produces acetone. So that's highly flammable, and maybe there's enough that could lead to spontaneous human combustion. But I kind of don't think there's enough to catch actual fire, but possible. The victims are also usually elderly, so like maybe they can't, like an accident happens and they can't put themselves out or something.
Oh.
And usually the hands and feet like fall off and aren't burned, which is weird. And the fires cause little damage to other combustible materials in contact with the body or like really nearby the body, so like nothing else is usually touched, or like maybe there's like a little bit of scorching but it's not like melted or anything like you would think in a fire. And usually the combustion of the body has left a residue of greasy ashes, and it usually smells like sickly sweet, which I guess maybe that's just how a human body burning smells, I guess, anyway. I don't know. I don't know if that's like different in these cases or if that's just like normal. But the theory of spontaneous human combustion was supposedly first put forward in 1641 by a Danish doctor and mathematician, Thomas Bartholin, in his Historiarum Anatomicarum Latin Rerorum, I guess, a tome, which cataloged strange medical phenomena to describe the death of an Italian knight called Polonus Borsius, I guess. And according to Bartholin, Polonus drank a few glasses of strong wine with his parents at his home in Milan, and then he burped fire and died by the flames. So that's maybe the first case of it, I guess.
Oh.
There was an extensive 2-year research project in 1984 that involved 30 historical cases of alleged spontaneous human combustion. And the research was conducted by science investigator Joe Nickel and forensic analyst John F. Fisher. And their findings were that most of the cases were found close to like a plausible source for the ignition, either candles, lamps, fireplaces, like stuff like that. So they're thinking that's caused it, but maybe that just got lost in the fire again. They also found there was a correlation between the deaths and the victim's intoxication or other form of incapacitation, which could have caused them to be careless or unable to respond properly to an accident. And they said where the destruction of the body wasn't extensive, the primary source of the combustible fuel could have been the victim's clothing or a covering such as a blanket. So like maybe they dropped ash from a cigarette on a blanket and then it caught fire and then they couldn't like get up or something, so they just died there. And cases where the destruction was extensive, additional fuel sources were involved, like such as chair stuffing, floor coverings, the flooring material itself, like stuff like that. And such materials could help retain melted fat, which caused more of the body to be burned and destroyed, like yielding more liquefied fat, so it just kept feeding itself. And that process is known as the wick effect or the candle effect. So a lot of these cases, they're thinking is due to that effect.
That's pretty morbid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still like crazy to think about, even if it's not like spontaneous necessarily, but
Yeah, it's sad.
yeah. Yeah, and according to them, nearby objects often remained undamaged due to the tendency of fires to like burn upward, but like burning laterally is usually difficult for a fire. And they said the fires were probably relatively small because it was like just their body. So like maybe it couldn't even catch nearby materials on fire, like how a campfire doesn't catch things on fire that's right next to it. And so there are a number of natural explanations like offered up for cases, and like maybe it's a case by case basis. Like maybe some of these are applicable to some cases and some are for others. But one is that again, almost all cases involve someone with low mobility due to age or obesity, along with like poor health. So these people have a high likelihood of dying in their sleep or being unable to move once being caught on fire by an accident. It's like maybe they have a heart attack too and then drop the cigarette they're smoking or something. Because yeah, smoking is often found as a source for the fire. In a lot of cases, the victims are smokers, or they were found near like fireplaces. Okay, so the wick effect I think is probably the most popular theory though, which we already talked about, but like the idea is like a small external flame source chars the clothing, so it could even be like just a little ember, but then it goes through the clothing and splits the skin, which releases fat, so then it gets a bigger flame from that, and the fat's absorbed by the clothing, so it acts as a wick. And it continues to fuel the fire, like as long as the burnable material's available and the fat's available. So it just will keep going. So like even a little thing could, and then if either they're already dead from a heart attack or they can't move, then it's just, that's what happens, I guess. And this has been tested in pig tissue, and it's consistent with the evidence recovered from cases of human combustion. So that's probably most of these. And this kind of explains why the hands and feet often don't burn, because there's not as much fat in those parts of the body. So like the flame can't spread there due to the wick effect. However, since this is like slow combustion that would last for hours, this gives water time to evaporate slowly from the body in an enclosed area. So like if you're in a house, you should see moisture recondense nearby, like on windows. So that's not really detailed in a lot of the cases, but like, would you notice that, I guess, if you went in? Like, would you detail it? I don't know.
Or how long after?
Yeah, when they're found.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that might be a hole in the case, but that's like so small. Like, why would you? I don't know. I don't know if you would notice. Or, yep, it's a long time. Another theory is that some of the cases are self-immolation as a form of suicide, but was incorrectly cataloged. Since, like, in the West, I guess those types of suicides account for 1%, but in other countries it can be as much as 40% of suicides, so maybe it's underreported in the West, and it's being categorized as, like, spontaneous human combustion instead. Although, like, I don't think any of the cases find, like, a note, like a suicide note or anything. So, other natural theories are the ketosis theory that we already talked about, and also apparently, like, inhaling or digesting phosphorus in different forms can lead to the formation of phosphine, which can auto-ignite too. So, like, those are two theories. I don't know if, like, how it would ignite inside, I guess, but that's possible. But yeah, it does seem like most of these cases have probably a external, but it gets lost. But we'll get into the 5 cases that I found that had the most, like, detail on it. So the first is Maybelle Andrews, but this one seems more of like a legend, so I'll talk about another lady after this as like one case together. But either October 1938 or October sometime in the late 1950s, Maybelle Andrews was dancing in a Soho nightclub in London with her boyfriend Billy Clifford, and they said suddenly blue flames erupted from her back, chest, and shoulders, and within minutes she was reduced to ash, and Billy was badly burned trying to put the flames out. And he later stated that there were no open flames in the room and the fire had come from Maybelle herself. But, like, again, this one seems like a legend that's been embellished.
I guess my thought is if they were in a nightclub, could someone have been smoking a cigarette? Because
Right.
smoking inside was so common then.
Yeah, and she brushed
Yeah.
the cigarette.
There
Although,
are a lot of things that could have started it other than spontaneous
Right.
combustion.
right, yeah. But, like, if you brush a cigarette, I don't think it just engulfs you in flames. I guess I don't know what her clothing would have been made out of, but...
Right.
But yeah, but like that story seems to be based on an actual case of 22-year-old Phyllis Newcomb. So on August 27th, 1938, the Chelmsford City Football Club played its first match that day, and the supporters club organized a dance party for the occasion in the Shire Hall. And the mayor of Chelmsford and other town dignitaries were there. And among the 400 attendees were Phyllis Newcomb and her fiancé, Henry McAusland, which he went by Mac. And they said Phyllis wore her best dress, which resembled a crinoline, I guess, which is like a petticoat, like the ball gown style.
It has like the what is that? Like kind of tulle, like a stiff tulle to fluff up.
Right. Yeah, and it like billowed out and like would sweep the floor. And it said it was made of white tulle with satin underneath and like a dark blue waist sash. But these were like, there were witnesses and stuff, so this actually happened. But the party ended at midnight, and Phyllis and Mac stayed like a little longer to avoid like the crowd leaving. But when they left, like Mac was a few paces ahead of her, and they reached the staircase to go down to like the first floor exit, and he heard Phyllis scream behind him. So he turned around, and he saw the bottom front of the tulle dress burning brightly and furiously. And she ran back to the ballroom where there were still like 20 people there, and they saw her stumble inside like on fire, and she collapsed at the entrance. So 5 of the guests rushed over to her and like wrapped her in coats to try to stifle the blaze. And like they were slightly burned in the process too. And the ambulance arrived like 20 minutes later, which I feel like is a long time to arrive. But this was also 1938, I guess. And she was taken to Chelmsford Hospital. So she had serious burns on her legs, arms, and chest. And she did seem like she would recover, but then her wounds became septic and led to pneumonia, so she died a few weeks later on September 15th, 1938.